Good evening, it's 8 o'clock, the top headlines tonight. India is now at nearly 3 lakh cases in 24 hours. It's likely to cross 3 lakhs daily by tomorrow morning. Daily deaths also crossed 2,000 for the first time. This amidst controversy over underreporting. Here are the visuals that show that multiple bodies on one pyre in Delhi's main cremation site, Nigambodh Ghat. Also from Delhi to Bengaluru, long queues at cremation sites. "24 die in a Nashik hospital in Maharashtra as an oxygen leak disrupts supply. Frantic relatives try to save patients, but 24 die. Meanwhile, states fight for oxygen as hospitals across the country say SOS. The centre increases Delhi and other states' oxygen quota. A Haryana minister says Delhi is looting oxygen. Meanwhile, now in Mumbai, doctors applaud as oxygen tankers reach. Oxygen is really the new liquid gold. India's vaccines are working. The first government data shows that only 0.03% people were infected after 2 doses of Covishield and only 0.04% infected after 2 doses of Covaxin. In total, only 27,000 cases of infection from 12.71 crores total of people vaccinated. Covaxin has 78% efficacy according to the top medical body ICMR and Bharat Biotech's press release. They also say that Covaxin does act against new Indian mutants. This comes just as Dr. Ella had said that they were actually waiting for more data. Covishield will cost 400 rupees for states and 600 rupees for private hospitals as the centre will pay 150 rupees. The opposition asks why different prices for the same vaccine. Bengaluru touches a new record of its highest cases, crosses 13,000 cases today. Meanwhile, Mumbai cases show a 7% decline in 2 weeks. And our series on pandemic heroes, extraordinary Indians doing their bits. A young law student now delivers to COVID patients. Well, the latest numbers, as we've been reporting, India now accounts for 1 in 3 infections in the world. And now we are touching almost 3 lakh cases daily. Also, worryingly, we can see that graph that we've been over 2.5 lakhs now for 2-3 days, and that number is likely to continue. The worrying figure also is on deaths. We've crossed for the first time 2,023 deaths in 1 day. So again, an extremely worrying figure there. April's deaths crossing 20,000, rising at 10% in the weekly average. So as we've been reporting, it's not about data, it's about human lives. So from across the country, we can see what the biggest battle is for, whether it's for beds, whether it's for oxygen, and whether it's for hospital admissions. In a Kota Medical College hospital, 2 patients died due to a fall in oxygen pressure at night in their ward. Relatives say it dropped because after midnight, the air pressure wasn't restored for 2 hours, leading to the deaths. Also now, let's look at Bihar. Now, Bihar, of course, has amongst the worst health infrastructure in India. Here, patients, both COVID and non-COVID patients, are being treated together in the same ward. They're lying on the floor. So there's infection being spread even to those who are not COVID positive, but there are just not enough beds for the number of patients. This is in rural Bihar. And on a day when the Madhya Pradesh government claimed it had a surplus supply of oxygen, shocking visuals of people here ransacking the oxygen storeroom and looting cylinders from the Damoh district hospital. They said they needed these cylinders for their relatives who were in critical condition. But tonight's most tragic story comes from a Maharashtra hospital in Nashik, where 24 people have died as the oxygen supply was disrupted in a major oxygen leak which happened to the tanker there. All these 24 patients were on ventilators. We warn you that there are disturbing visuals in this story as relatives try to save these patients, their loved ones.
The desperation, the frantic attempts to revive their loved ones, relatives beating on patients' chests as tragically life-saving oxygen just ran out for a crucial 30 minutes.
मम्मी मर गई। क्या हो गया था? कब लाए थे? मेरे को इन्होंने ऑक्सीजन नहीं दिया, तड़प तड़प के मर गई। कब लाए थे उनको? उनको 5 दिन हो गया, रिकवर हो गई थी। अभी ऑक्सीजन नहीं था तो मर गई, तड़प तड़प के मर गई।
The tragedy happened at 12:30 this afternoon when an oxygen tanker refilling the cylinder at the Municipal Corporation Hospital started leaking. Soon, white fumes filled the entire area in this hospital. At the time, there were 150 patients who were on oxygen plus ventilator support. Immediately, the rush began to move them to other hospitals, but for many, it was too late.
उस टाकी का कॉक डैमेज होने की वजह से सवेरे प्रेशर नीचे आ गया। इस वजह से इन्वेजिव वेंटिलेटर पे जितने भी लोग थे उनको ऑक्सीजन टाइम पे मिला नहीं। 22 लोगों की मौत हो चुकी है। वो टाकी इमीडिएटली एक आधे घंटे के अंदर भी शुरू हो गई। वो अभी उसी टाकी से सप्लाई हो रहा है।
इस घटना की पूरी जानकारी लेके पूरी उसकी इंक्वायरी करने के बाद इसके बारे में जो भी दोषी होंगे उस पर कार्रवाई की जाएगी।
The government says there will be a high-level probe and compensation is also being announced. But today, permanent damage done to all those 22 families who lost their loved ones because of a human error. With Kishore Belsare in Nashik and Purva Chitnis in Mumbai, Anusya Mathur for NDTV.
A heart-wrenching tragedy, as the Prime Minister put it. Purva joins me for more, who is at Nashik. Purva, what are the latest details we have? We now know that 24 ventilator patients have actually died. The oxygen supply was disrupted for half an hour and so many people dying. What's the current situation in Maharashtra, where we've heard from Nashik to Ahmednagar, hospitals are saying they're running out of oxygen?
Absolutely, very tragic indeed. I mean, those helpless cries and, you know, the patients' relatives who lost their loved ones there. This is a really bad tragedy, a human error tragedy that happened in Nashik. But yes, you're right, be it Ahmednagar or Aurangabad, everywhere it's the same scene that, you know, the oxygen supply is in fact going down in every hospital. Even in Mumbai, there are quite few hospitals who are in fact, you know, running out of oxygen and they are very short on oxygen supply. But as far as this Nashik tragedy is concerned, well, as we know, as of now, at least 24 people who were on ventilator lost their life in this tragedy. However, the government has in fact announced a high-level probe in this, and the government has in fact also announced a 5 lakh compensation to each of their relatives of the victims who died, and also the Nashik Corporation has also separately announced 5 lakh compensation.
That, I mean, the compensation is announced, probes are announced, but what actually happens? Those lives are lost. But perhaps after this, as you said, the Prime Minister, the Home Minister have tweeted on this. The centre has said that 19 states and union territories will now get more oxygen. This comes amid a bitter fight over oxygen between Delhi, Haryana and Uttar Pradesh. The states to get more oxygen are Maharashtra, Gujarat, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Delhi, who will get augmented supply from the centre. The centre says this also comes as both Reliance and the Tata Group have also started converting their industrial oxygen into medical oxygen, and a controversy over why India was actually exporting industrial oxygen in the last 3 months. In Delhi today, again, there were SOS calls from various hospitals to NDTV through the day, saying make it public that we are actually running out of oxygen in a few hours. The centre has now assured them they will get adequate supply. But listen to what this actually means for patients who are running around to get, for relatives of patients who are running around to get oxygen beds.
मैं रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ, केजरीवाल से हाथ जोड़ के रिक्वेस्ट करता हूँ, मेरा परिवार चला गया, किसी और का परिवार ना जाए। इस अस्पताल को, इस क्या दिल्ली के किसी भी अस्पताल को, हिंदुस्तान के किसी भी अस्पताल को, सबको कोई सा भी हॉस्पिटल हो, सबके अंदर ऑक्सीजन पूर्ति करे और इंजेक्शन पूरी करे, वरना अनर्थ हो जाएगा, अनर्थ हो जाएगा।
Suresh Gupta lost his 46-year-old sister-in-law to COVID last night as she gasped for oxygen.
27,000 के इंजेक्शन ला के मैंने ब्लैक में ढूंढ के ला के दिया उनको। उस रेमडेसिविर, हाँ जी, और वो इंजेक्शन को लगा नहीं। अगर वो इंजेक्शन लगता तो रिकवरी जरूर होती। मेरी रोज पेशेंट से बात हो रही थी, वो यही कह रही है चिल्ला के कि कोई दवाई नहीं मिल रही, ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिल रहा, मैं मर जाऊंगी। आधे घंटे में अभी 8 बोडियां निकली हैं, कल 1 घंटे में 12-13 बोडियां निकली हैं।
GTB hospital officials refused to comment on camera but denied the charges of patients getting affected due to oxygen shortage. With just hours left for their oxygen to run out, several top Delhi hospitals like GTB, Sir Gangaram, LNJP and Max received fresh supplies through the night. But across the government and private hospitals, the supply is not likely to last more than one day. At Delhi's biggest COVID-dedicated hospital, LNJP, at least 1,500 patients are on oxygen out of 2,100 total COVID patients.
अभी हमारा जो डिमांड है 3-4 टन से बढ़ करके 21 टन पे आ गया है। 21 टन ऑक्सीजन हमें रोज चाहिए लोकनायक में। कल रात को हमें बड़ी परेशानी हुई क्योंकि हमारा ऑक्सीजन का जो टैंकर है वो लेट आया। रात को 3 बजे तक मैं पूरी रात में जागता रहा और 3 बजे तक उसका वेट करते रहे, फ़ोन करते रहे कि हमारा जो सेंट्रल सप्लाई है उसका प्रेशर ड्रॉप हो गया। ड्रॉप होने की वजह से हमने 100 से ज़्यादा सिलेंडर यूज किए, तब जाके पेशेंट स्टेबलाइज हुए। रात को फिर हमारे पास 10 टन ऑक्सीजन मिल गई थी। 2 टैंकर हमारे पास आ गए थे। अभी हमें 12 घंटे का बैकअप है, पर आज हमें दिन में 2 टैंकर और आने की संभावना है।
Other hospitals are still struggling.
About 78 patients, corona, and almost all of them need oxygen. We had stock left for about 4 or 5 hours. I've also been in touch with the Delhi Health Secretary. He's been very helpful and cooperative.
Amid this scarcity, the Haryana government today ordered police protection for all tankers, alleging loot by neighbouring Delhi.
और कल हमारा एक टैंकर हमारे फरीदाबाद के अस्पतालों के लिए ऑक्सीजन लेके दिल्ली से जा रहा था। दिल्ली वालों ने, दिल्ली सरकार ने हमारे उस टैंकर को लूट लिया। हालांकि अब मैंने आदेश जारी कर दिए कि जो भी टैंकर जाएगा वो पुलिस एस्कॉर्ट के साथ जाएगा।
The centre today claimed that it has ramped up oxygen production and has resolved the issue of movement of oxygen tankers between Delhi and Haryana. But Delhi's hospitals are still reporting oxygen shortage and there is no long-term strategy in sight. In New Delhi with Sharat Sharma, this is Sukirti Dwivedi for NDTV.
And that's happening in Delhi. Across India, the situation is much worse. You can see that because in Mumbai, in this hospital, doctors actually lined up to applaud outside as an oxygen tanker actually reached. Applause as the oxygen arrived in the nick of time at this Mumbai hospital, the HD Doshi Hindu Sabha hospital, where they were running out of oxygen. The deadline was 6:30 p.m. this evening. The oxygen tanker reached just in the nick of time, literally life-saving oxygen reaching there. Doctors, administration, relatives, all on tenterhooks till that life-saving oxygen reaches. But the tragedy remains, and this is a tragedy which is reflected across the country, is the high number of deaths, each one a precious individual for his or her family and loved ones. So Delhi's biggest funeral site, the Nigombod Ghat, is getting COVID bodies for cremation non-stop. They're just coming in, lines of ambulances, bodies just waiting to be cremated. Sonakshi is there now. This is a very difficult story to cover, and I warn our viewers that these visuals can be disturbing, but this actually reflects the reality of what's happening around India. And in Delhi, at Nigombod Ghat, Sonakshi, the disturbing visuals and scenes around you.
At one of the largest cremation grounds in the national capital, the Nigombod Ghat. Visuals speak for themselves, but what is key over here is that they say as per the Hindu rituals, no cremation takes place after sunset. But for the last few days at this cremation ground, stream of bodies, a lot of people coming in. COVID deaths have been coming into this particular area, overflowed. In fact, at a point, even at night, this is a 24-hour place that runs for 24 hours. A quick reaction from somebody who has been working here for a very long time. आपसे बस जानना चाहूँगी संक्षेप में कि आप स्थिति इतनी गंभीर हो चुकी है कि रात भर भी हमको देखने को मिलता है।
बिल्कुल मैम, यहाँ पे
बहुत सारे
डेड बॉडीज आ रही हैं, कोविड की भी आ रही हैं, नॉर्मल भी आ रही हैं।
अच्छा,
हाँ जी, 24 आवर्स निगमबोध घाट चालू है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है।
और यहाँ पे सनसेट के बाद, ढलने के बाद भी यहाँ पे हो रहा है और यहाँ पे इतना भीड़ भी जम जा रहा है कोविड।
मैम भीड़ देखो ऐसा है, अब जैसे गवर्नमेंट के रूल फॉलो हो रहे हैं, कुछ बॉडियों में तो 2 बंदे आ रहे हैं जिन्हें कंधा देने को भी नसीब नहीं है, कुछ बॉडियों में 20, 25, 30 आदमी आ रहे हैं। ऐसा नहीं है कि जो पहले भीड़ भाड़ आ रही थी वो भीड़ भाड़ आ रही है, लेकिन गवर्नमेंट के रूल फॉलो करके। क्यों? क्योंकि एक तो ये लॉकडाउन जो कर्फ्यू लगा है, इससे भी काफ़ी स्ट्रिक्टनेस है। दिल्ली पुलिस भी जो है हर जगह ई पास मांग रही है, हर चीज़ मांग रही है। जगह तो है मैम, जगह है ऐसी कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, हॉस्पिटल्स में जगह नहीं है, वहाँ पे तो जो है रोड पे बेचारे मरीज हो रहे हैं, बाकी यहाँ पे ऐसी कोई दिक्कत नहीं आ रही। हमने एक्स्ट्रा प्लेटफॉर्म्स का भी इंतजाम किया हुआ है और नदी किनारे हमने एक्स्ट्रा प्लेटफॉर्म्स बनाए हैं। कहने का मतलब ये है कि हमारा जो NGO यहाँ चला रहा है और प्लस जो MCD के अफसर हैं वो सब मिलके इसे जो है ना बढ़िया तरीके से कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ऐसा है कि आम जनता को कोई भी परेशानी शमशान में ना आए। और ये निगम बोध घाट दिल्ली का सबसे बड़ा शमशान है।
Like you heard from him that even the officials, the authorities here and the people who've been working here and taking part of the rituals and the processes are saying that they're trying to make the process as smooth as they can for people coming in.
And in fact,
remember,
Sonakshi,
this is
that
one of the
really
largest
is
places,
the irony
but
of
is
what,
also seeing a constant stream.
Sonakshi, the irony of what he just told you, he said the hospitals don't have beds, but we have place at our cremation ground. So that really is, I think, the tragedy of this situation, that life-saving hospital beds may not be available, but they're trying to, even whether it's on the banks of the river or at creating extra space for dead bodies to be given the final farewell. Thanks, Sonakshi, for joining us from Nigambodh Ghat. And in Karnataka as well, fresh highs in numbers, 23,000 new cases. That's the highest so far in Karnataka. The positivity rate above 15%, and over 13,000 new cases in Bengaluru. That's a record for the city. And as this is happening, Karnataka has decided that emergency land will be given for funerals, for cremations, right outside the main city. So the irony that we now need extra land for funerals.
Even saying goodbye is harder during the fierce second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Bengaluru, relatives wait for hours for the cremation of their loved ones.
ನಾವು ಮನೆಗೆ ಹೋಗೋಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ 1:30 ನೈಟು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಡೋಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ ನೆನ್ನೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಸುಡೋಷ್ಟೊತ್ತಿಗೆ 12 ಗಂಟೆ ಆಯ್ತು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮದು 28ನೇದೋ 29ನೇದೋ ಬಾಡಿ, ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಬಾಡಿ 12 ಗಂಟೆ ಆಯಿತು. ನಾವು ಮನೆಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಸ್ನಾನ ಮಾಡಿ 2 ಗಂಟೆ ಆಯಿತು. ತೊಂದರೆ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ.
ಈಗ ಸೆಕೆಂಡ್ ಪೇಷಂಟ್ ಕಾಯ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಒಂದು ಆಯಿತು, ಈಗ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ನಮ್ಮದೇ ಕ್ಯೂ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಲ್ಲ, ಟೋಕನ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿ.
And so the state government is setting up emergency cremation grounds to cope with the extra demand.
Already DC is on the work, so borewell, electric points, and water facility, everything, all infrastructure will be temporarily. This is the land for temporary, for the burning for COVID.
ಭಾರಿ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಸರ್, ಸರ್ಕಾರ ಮಾಡಿರೋದು ಭಾರಿ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ. ತನ್ನ ಹಳ್ಳಿಯವ್ರು ಬಂದಾದರೂ ಮಕ ಆದರೂ ನೋಡಿ ಇದು ಅಂತ್ಯ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರಕ್ಕೆ ಭಾರಿ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಸರ್ಕಾರದಿಂದ ಮಾಡಿರೋದು ಭಾರಿ ಉತ್ತಮವಾದ ಕೆಲಸ. ಅದು ಕ್ಯೂ ಸುಮಾರು ನಮ್ಮದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಮೊದಲೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ತಗೊಂಡೋಗಿ ನಮ್ಮೂರೊಳಗೆ ಅಂತ್ಯ ಸಂಸ್ಕಾರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂತ ಇದ್ದೀವಿ.
The pain of those who have lost a loved one to COVID-19 would only be worsened by an endless wait at a crematorium. The Karnataka government is now in the process of identifying land on the outskirts of cities and villages to be used as emergency cremation grounds. The sad reality of life in this, the pandemic era. With DM Kumar, Maya Sharma in Bengaluru for NDTV.
Well, some ray of good news. Could Mumbai be turning a corner? The 2-week growth percentage in COVID cases shows a 7% decline in 2 weeks. So that's some good news coming there from Mumbai. This, of course, as there's been a severe, curfew. They don't call it lockdown, but that's expected. But there's been a severe curfew in Mumbai now for the last 2 weeks. And, well, more good news, and this is actually big. The first data which shows that vaccinations are actually working. The Health Ministry released this today. Here's what the Health Secretary said, and then Sukiti analyzes these numbers.
2 to 4 per 10,000 breakthrough infections have occurred after vaccination, which is a very small number, and this is because of the healthcare workers and the frontline workers, which were the first to be vaccinated, and they are prone to more occupational exposure, and vaccination should continue. The second point is that the current highly transmissible second wave may also contribute little bit or minuscule to this percentage. Otherwise, this could have been even 0%.
So this is the first actual official data on Indian vaccinations and how effective they are. Sukiti, what's the big headline out of this?
Well, yes, that's the good news that we've received in the form of this data, is that out of at least 12.7 crore people that have been vaccinated so far, only a very minimum percentage of that, that's 0.02% people actually got COVID after getting vaccinated. If we look at the comparative numbers between Covaxin, after receiving the second dose of Covaxin, only 0.04% people have been infected. If we look at Covishield, only 0.03% people have been infected after receiving even the second dose. One other important point that the Health Ministry today highlighted is that even among these, it's the healthcare workers who are more likely getting the infection even after the second dose. But one has to understand that they are working in a very risky environment. The chances of them catching the infection are higher. And also, just to add some real life examples on how people have been receiving this news, we earlier had Sir Gangaram hospitals. Many of them, doctors from that hospital had tested positive even after receiving the second dose. But doctors from the hospital had clarified that the symptoms are going to be a lot less severe because these healthcare workers have received the second dose.
So that's really good news. The first official vaccination data out. It works. Please go and get yourself vaccinated if, of course, you have vaccines available in your centers. Well, Adar Poonawala, the head of the world's biggest COVID vaccine manufacturing, that's of course Serum Institute, spoke to NDTV's Vishnu Shom, and he talked about, well, the different pricing now for the vaccine, whether it goes to states, private hospitals or the center.
How soon will you be in a position to ramp up supplies to meet the enhanced requirement for vaccines?
We are ramping up immediately, and the big ramp up will happen post July, but even between now and July, we are going to ramp up 15 to 20% in our monthly capacities. Starting by the end of May, this product will be visible in the market, 15 to 20% more. And then after July, it will be beyond 40% of our existing capacities. So we'll cross after July 100 million doses per month.
How many doses will you now be producing for states and the center, and how many doses of Covishield do you plan to ultimately sell in the private market?
We will try to split it evenly as much as possible between states and private supply.
Has the centre agreed to fund 3,000 crores towards ramping up Serum's Covishield manufacturing facilities? And when will the first tranche of these funds arrive?
The 3,000 crore amount we keep seeing in the media has been sanctioned, and we believe it will come to us very soon. We have not waited but borrowed from the banks to get on with the ramp up, with the assumption that this funding from the government will reach us very soon this week.
Once you do ramp up production, at what rate will you be producing Covishield? And in the interim period, what is the rate that you are providing Covishield at?
As I have said, it's a fixed rate of Covishield to the central government of 150 rupees, and then to the state governments it's higher, and to the private hospitals it's even higher.
Well, meanwhile, Adar Poonawala, then huge controversies. The opposition has actually asked that why is it that there are now different prices for the center, for the state and for private hospitals. States will have to pay 450 rupees and this thing is 600 rupees for hospitals, private hospitals. Let's just go, however, to Covaxin, which now has 78% efficacy, according to the centre's top medical body, the ICMR, and Bharat Biotech, which has released their phase 3 trial results. There's 78% efficacy, but 100% for severe COVID cases. There were 25,800 participants in phase 3. The analysis was done over 14 days post the second dose. Covishield's efficacy, Adar Poonawala's Covishield, is 79%. Well, breaking news coming in just now. The Delhi High Court has said that the centre has a directive, that they issued a directive that the centre must provide the fundamental right to life, which means that they must provide the oxygen needed by various states, saying that the centre should create dedicated corridors, saying it is the centre's responsibility to ensure sufficient oxygen supply to hospitals because this is the fundamental right to life, saying they must divert all oxygen to medical oxygen if needed. For instance, that includes industrial oxygen. They said you have the Air Force, and we had seen that this was an issue yesterday, and why have you done nothing the whole day? Meanwhile, other news, the opposition has been attacking the Prime Minister after his speech today, and Priyanka Gandhi in an interview to ANI asked why is it that the opposition is talking about the lack of oxygen and nothing is being done, and asked that how can the Prime Minister and top BJP leaders laugh at rallies when India is going through this crisis.
कितनी बड़ी त्रासदी ये है कि देश में ऑक्सीजन उपलब्ध है लेकिन जहां पहुंचना चाहिए वहां पहुंच नहीं पा रहा है, और किस चीज में व्यस्त हैं आज भी चुनाव प्रचार में व्यस्त हैं, स्टेज पे जाकर हंस रहे हैं, कोई जाके चुनावी रैलियों में टेस्ट करा रहा है, कोई चेक कर रहा है कि इतनी बड़ी भीड़ इकट्ठी हो रही है, 40,000 लोग 30,000 लोग इकट्ठे हो रहे हैं, आपने अभी तक नहीं किया, अब तो करिए, अब तो रोकिए.
And as we end tonight, let's end with good news, with people who are going beyond the normal to actually help out. Today, we look at our pandemic hero, a young law student in Hyderabad, who's making sure that he's going on his own to actually organize delivery of foods and medicines for people who are COVID positive and can't leave the house.
A few days ago, I noticed that there are a lot of cases coming in and around my area and also overall in the country. So I put out a tweet on my Twitter handle telling that if anyone who lives in Hyderabad needs any help in running errands like groceries or anything, and I've been delivering it to their house. And so far in the last 6-7 days, I've received more than 50 requests. Apart from that, like the tweet spiraled out, I've been also getting requests from all over the country to help them with oxygen beds or ICU or any other thing.